Hey, it's Jeff Zito, and thanks for checking out another episode of the Celebrity Jobber podcast. We're streaming on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, wherever you listen to podcasts. So please subscribe. Would love a 5-star rating. And if you could, please leave a review. If you want to go back in time, check out our past guests and episodes. You can do so by going to celebrityjobber.com, taking a look at celebrities before fame, their first jobs, the moment that changed everything for them, and maybe, just maybe, we'll go into a direction that you don't know. Some of these celebrities were famous, years ago, and now you haven't heard of them in a while. So what are they doing? And that's pretty much what we're going to get into today with my guest, Andrew McCarthy. You remember him as a member of the Brat Pack in the 1980s, a group of young actors who were cast in all these movies that were catering to a younger audience, and it became a phenomenon. And actually, Andrew McCarthy did a documentary on Hulu about a year or so ago. It's called Brats. And it was really interesting to hear how they hated that term, the Brat Pack. And after all of these years later, instead of embracing the term, they still resent it. You know, especially Emilio Estevez, Molly Ringwald, and Judd Nelson. And it all pretty much came from an article that was written in the mid-'80s. And perhaps they were too young and took the term too literal. So anyway, we're going to talk about that. We haven't seen Andrew McCarthy in film or TV in quite some time. So what is he doing now? I can tell you one thing that he's doing. He's an author and has a new book out, and we'll talk to him about that. Not to mention his big break, his first job. And what's interesting is we kind of grew up in the same area of New Jersey. And I always feel like people from New Jersey share this certain bond, if you will. But I don't know, maybe not. I remember mentioning to Laura Prepon, Donna from that 70s show, that I lived right down the road from the street she used to live on, Old Sterling Road. And she couldn't have cared less. Actually, I think I kind of creeped her out. So maybe I'll keep away from the Jersey thing with Andrew McCarthy, but I just can't help myself. Really excited about this episode featuring actor Andrew McCarthy, my guest this week on Celebrity Jobber.
The Celebrity Jobber podcast with Jeff Zito. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, give a 5-star rating, and leave a review. Check out all our past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you pod. What if these celebrities weren't famous? What would they have become? What was their first job? We're about to find out.
Hey, Andrew, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. You know, I don't know if this is true anymore, but I guess we're neighbors, kind of. We were. I'm from Watchung, New Jersey. I had no idea that you were from New Jersey. All these years, I had no idea you were from New Jersey.
Yeah, I grew up in Westfield, not far.
Not far at all. There's actually a bunch of kids that went to my CCD that went to Pingree, and you went to Pingree, so...
You don't have to say it with that kind of pointed snap. You know, I understand.
So, this is really cool to talk to you. Actor, director, filmmaker, travel writer, author. Those are all of your jobs.
Yeah, I can't hold a job, apparently, yeah.
What's your favorite out of all of those?
Oh, kind of all. I just finished acting. I just acted in a play that just finished yesterday, and I hadn't done a play in 20 years. So that was kind of fun to do. And but I have to say, I do like sitting alone in a room, and the older I get, and just sort of writing. I find that.
Right.
Yeah, I love that.
Now, tell me, I want to talk about your current job, which is as an author. You have a new book, but I wanted to talk about your very first job. Can you rewind all the way back? And maybe it wasn't in showbiz. What was your very first paycheck? Do you remember that day?
My first job, I was a dishwasher at the Pizza Pub in Seaside Heights, New Jersey.
Oh,
and it
down
was
the shore.
Down the shore, yeah. And it was great. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was the summer after my high school graduation, and I was fantastic. I was rented a rat hole of an apartment with 2 other buds, and we were all worked in the kitchen at this one really bad, seedy restaurant and had a great time. Had a great summer.
So that was the summer before you went to NYU. And I just watched the documentary Brats not too long ago, just to familiarize myself again. I thought it was great. I saw it when it first came out. You mentioned, and you kind of wear it like a badge of honor, you got kicked out of NYU. Can you tell us, why? What did you do?
I do. I am very proud of it. Although my daughter goes to NYU right now, so I'm like, do as I say, not as I do. Anyway, yeah, I was in the acting program. So that meant 3 days a week I was in acting classes, 2 days a week I was in academic classes. And I just sort of didn't show up for my academic classes. I was interested in the acting stuff, but I wasn't interested in the other. So they said after 2 years, you know what, we'll just struggle on without you here.
Okay, so there's no big story. There's no. It's just bad. You weren't going.
I just didn't bother to show up. Yeah,
you were buying those 2 joints from the Rastafarian guy in the park every day. And
every day, yeah.
That was getting in the way of school. Okay, I get it.
School was getting in the way of that. That was my mentality at the time.
Celebrity Jobber. The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito.
So your dad was in the world of finance. Your mom wrote for a newspaper. Did she write for the Star Ledger? What did your mom do?
My mom actually sold advertising for newspapers and then New Jersey Monthly Magazine, and she also sold art in an art gallery at one point. Yeah.
And your love of writing, where did that come from?
I have no idea. I didn't write anything until I was in my 30s. I didn't read any of the books I was supposed to read in high school. I didn't do any of that. And one day I just picked up a pen. I started, I was traveling the world, and it's a longer story, but it's why I became a travel writer. I was in Saigon, and I had an amazing day, and I just wrote about it. I didn't know what to do when I got back to my hotel. I was so excited. And so I just picked up a pen and just wrote about what happened. And I was like, whoa, there I am. And it was the exact same feeling I had when I was 15 years old and walked out on stage in the high school play of as the Artful Dodger, and it was that sense of like, oh my gosh, there I am. You know what I mean? So it was a very similar feeling. So that sort of started my writing kind of journey. And then I became a travel writer for magazines, and then that led to books and whatnot.
So books, let's talk about your new book. It's called Who Needs Friends? And I find it kind of funny because I think a lot of people, regular, average, everyday ham and eggers like me, can relate to a guy like you in Hollywood and, getting into, the middle of your life. You had all these times, you had all these experiences with these friends. Like you thought these friends, it would never die, these experiences. And then you find yourself in middle age, losing contact with all of them. Now, tell me a little bit about the book, Who Needs Friends, and how this began.
Yeah, I was sitting at the kitchen table. It was a very clear moment, and my son was telling me a story about one of his buds. His 21-year-old son was telling me a story about one of his buds. Really funny. We're laughing, and then as we kind of settled down, he looked up at me and said, "You don't really have any friends, do you, Dad?" And
how'd that make you feel?
I took the hit, and I said, "You know what, Sammy? I do have friends. I just don't see them, but I know they're there, and that's enough." And he went, "Yeah, okay, whatever." And he went off to see his girlfriend, and I sat with that, and I thought, you know what? It's not enough. I need to go see my friends. And I, like many guys, had this core group when I was young, and, through life and careers and families, they sort of scattered. And I realized I hadn't seen these dear friends in years and years, sometimes decades. And so I thought, I just need to go see these people. And so I got in my car, and since I hate driving on highways, I started driving back roads across America. I drove 10,000 miles to go zigzagging all over America to see these people. And along the way, because it was on my mind, this notion of friendship, I started approaching random men on this gas stations and restaurants, wherever. And I said, "Hey, will you talk to me about your friends?" And they all looked at me like, "Whoa, what are you talking about?" But I said, "No, I'm going to see my old friends." And I just thought, and invariably guys, "Oh yeah, okay." And not a single guy declined to talk to me. Everybody would, once I sort of warmed to the topic, love talking about it. And so many of them kind of went, "You know what? I've never talked about this before." And, so I just thought it was an interesting kind of topic. It grew into this kind of thing, and about, somewhere in the middle of Kentucky or somewhere, I thought, there's a book in this thing, because there's an overriding theme of men having isolated as the older we get, and we lose track of our friends, and we have them, but somehow, how come we're like not Like my wife
Following up
how come we're not following up? How come I'm not seeing these people? My wife is constantly making efforts to see her friends. And guys, somewhere along the line, the idea of being an American male and the man is to be stoic and go it alone and pull your hat down and carry your own water, and it's like, and that leads to a lot of isolation. And it was interesting. I asked everyone I met if they were lonely. And the young guys would go, oh yeah, I'm lonely a lot. And older guys like me would all say, no, I don't get lonely. And it was so interesting because loneliness is kind of, that can be construed as weakness. And the one thing a man can't be is weak.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So which just further isolates us. You know what I mean? So there seemed to be this common thread evolving the more people I talked to. So I just found that kind of fascinating. And then the more I reconnected with my friends and connected with these people, the more I felt driving in my car all alone across the country, the more I felt like there were all these people in the car with me then.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I just started to feel happier and more relaxed and more like who I know myself to be on a good day.
Andrew,
it was all connection.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito.
These friends, were they like people from high school or Pingree? Were they people from the Brat
one of
Pack?
them was from high school, and the rest were just folks I met before I was a successful actor. There were people that I just known.
Okay.
Most of them, but there were none of my Brat Pack brethren or that. Although I did just this morning get a text from Emilio Estevez saying that he'd read an excerpt from my book, and so that was really nice to get.
Right.
And like with that, I did this documentary about the Brat Pack a couple of years ago, and I reconnected with all those people. Thanks. And like since then, I've stayed in touch with them again, where I hadn't been in touch with them in decades. And so it's so nice to sort of bring your life up into the present and realize what value all of it has, and I that's really important.
And I could tell that it's been like 30 years since you talked to some of those guys. And I just wanted to say this from an outside perspective, because I found it very interesting in that documentary, which, again, very well done, because it was the centerpiece, it was the center of my life. I was a few years younger, but those movies were everything to me and still are. And I found it amazing that almost all of you had this negative. Now, granted, I didn't read the article, the scathing article, but you all had this negative thing from the term Brat Pack. And when I'm telling you, me and my friends in 1986, we were the Brat Pack. We wanted to be you guys. I thought it was a cool term. I thought Rat Pack, those guys are cool. Brat Pack, you're younger. So, kind of a play on words. But I was just amazed to see how hurt you guys, most of you, were by that term. And I just wanted to tell you, from an outsider's perspective, I wouldn't have taken it that way at all.
Yeah, I know. It's one of those crazy things. And over time, I've come to realize it's one of the greatest blessings of my life and my professional life, certainly, that, because people come up to me, people like you or whoever of a certain generation come up and they go, oh my God, those movies, man. And they start talking, and pretty soon their eyes kind of glaze over, and I realize, oh, they're not talking to me anymore. They're talking to their own youth. And,
right.
I represent that. Me and other members of the Brat Pack represent that to people. And it's such a great gift to be able to just receive them, because that moment in time when you're young and blossoming, like my son was when he said that to me about, you don't have any friends. It's, your life's a blank slate to be written on, and it's a wondrous time in life. And we represent that to that generation, and that's a real gift. And it took me a long time to realize that.
That's cool, though.
Yeah.
Do you consider a moment in your life, I don't know if it was class or just a moment in time, whether it was something on stage, a big break, something that happened to you that led to the Brat Pack, that basically changed your life forever, a particular phone call, a meeting with a director? Is there that one moment, or was it kind of a gradual path to success for you?
Well, I mean, I think when we're living our life forward, nothing seems like one big moment. But looking back, you can kind of pin things. I went in an audition for that movie Pretty in Pink, and Molly was in the audition room, Molly Ringwald, and I read the scene, and I went to audition, and she was there reading, and when I left the room, Molly turned around to John Hughes and said, "That's the guy." And John Hughes looked up at her and said, "That wimp?" And she said, no, he's romantic and, poetic. He's the guy. And I'd say that was the day that changed my life.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought you were a star before Pretty in Pink.
Well, that was before St. Elmo's Fire had come out too. And so it was but that was the moment where things just really changed in that way.
Wow. And I didn't know that was a wig at the end of the film either, just so you know.
I had a bad wig. If you watch that movie, if you watch that movie again, you'll see I look just really sad and forlorn, but it's just bad wig acting.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. Celebrity Jobber.
Now, I'm going to make a suggestion, and I don't know if anybody's going to listen to me, but here I am. I'm 50 years old, almost 51. And I know Molly, Judd, and Emilio are not going to do this. But, man, what about... we're getting older, and the Brat Pack is like, a reunion, a film. I mean, I think a lot of people would love to see something like that. Again, I know there seems like there's a few of them that are still kind of, not where you are yet, but I think Rob Lowe's in. I think you're in. I think Ali Sheedy's in. Demi's in. I mean, what do you think, man?
I'm with you, dude. I'm with you, Jeff. Let's shoot.
I don't know anything about what you do, but I'm just saying, have you guys talked about it or no?
Yeah, we kicked the idea around. I think it'd be a great idea. I think it'd be fun. You know what I mean? Right. And it's also, it led me reconnecting with all those guys and everything about all that made me have so much more affection for my youth too, which was a really nice thing. That's
cool. It's been, let me tell you, man, I was really excited to talk to you about all this stuff and relive some of this. So thanks so much. I want to just plug the book once again. Who Needs Friends? Andrew McCarthy. Of course, actor, director, filmmaker. You got to see Bratz if you haven't. It's still on Hulu. I just watched it last night. Travel writer, author, a lot of different jobs. His first job was at a pizza place in Seaside Heights right before he got kicked out of NYU. Been a real pleasure. And again, the book, Who Needs Friends? Everywhere. It's out right now, Andrew.
It is, yeah.
There you go. Andrew McCarthy, again, a real pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jeff.
I'm going to tell you that I've been in this business for over 30 years, and I've talked to pretty much every rock star, celebrity on the planet. And I'm going to be honest with you, when I found out Andrew McCarthy, I was going to be able to talk to him face-to-face on Zoom, I was a little nervous, and because he was like a really big star, in my youth. In the mid 80s, he was like a really big star. And I was, thinking about what I was going to say to him for weeks. I was really, and he couldn't have been any nicer, and really cool guy. But this is the one thing that I wanted to say about the Brat Pack that, again, I didn't read the initial interview that came out in the mid 80s, which I think was about Emilio. It was at some party. And it was this journalist who kind of coined the phrase, the Brat Pack. That took on a life of its own. But the Brat Pack members, if you will, Andrew McCarthy, Molly Ringwald, Judd Nelson, Emilio Estevez, Rob Lowe, Demi Moore, Ali Sheedy, maybe Anthony Michael Hall was in there. They really resented the term. And maybe looking at it from their perspective, they may have resented the term because it pigeonholed them to doing these teeny bopper John Hughes flicks. And maybe some of them wanted to become, serious actors and win an Oscar. And maybe they felt like that term prevented that from happening. And maybe they felt like being pigeonholed as a Brat Pack would have some kind of ill effects on their career. Now, one could say, we haven't seen Andrew McCarthy in a movie in quite some time. So was labeling him a member of the Brat Pack the reason for that? I don't think so personally, but I do think that a number of them feel that way. And again, I'll point out Molly Ringwald, Judd Nelson, and Emilio Estevez. They are not fond of that term, the Brat Pack. And I urge you to check out the documentary Bratz, which is on Hulu. Andrew grew up in Westfield, New Jersey. His father was in finance. His mother worked at a newspaper. Got interested in acting during high school. kicked out of NYU Film School, and went on to have a phenomenal career in film. In the movies Class, St. Elmo's Fire, Pretty in Pink, Less Than Zero, Weekend at Bernie's, the list goes on. And Andrew started writing for travel magazines, and then also wrote a young adult novel, his memoir. He's been a New York Times bestseller, and his latest book is called Who Needs Friends? And I guess the whole concept came from his son, Sam, who's also an actor. If you remember the Netflix series Dead to Me, he was in that. But I guess a question from his son, Sam, asking his father, why didn't he have any friends? So it got Andrew into examining why guys over time lose a connection to people that played a very important role in their lives when they were younger. You know, your friends, your buddies. You know, over time you get married, you have families, jobs, take in different directions, and you lose touch. I think it's something all guys can pretty much relate to. So Andrew goes on a cross-country journey in search of some of the friends of his youth. And not talking about Brat Pack brethren, like real friends, not in showbiz, from his earlier years. So again, very relatable to a lot of us guys. I only have like one friend from like 8th or 9th grade and through high school that I still talk to a couple times a week. Other than that, not many. Who needs friends? From actor, travel writer, television director, filmmaker, and author Andrew McCarthy. First job, by the way, at a pizza place on Seaside Heights, right after he graduated from high school and before he got kicked out of NYU. And what's funny to me is that he mentioned his big break was on the set of Pretty in Pink. And after his audition, he walked out. Molly Ringwald said, "That's the guy." And filmmaker John Hughes said, "That wimp?" I totally get it, but maybe it was Molly Ringwald who ultimately got Andrew McCarthy to become a member of the Brat Pack. Hey, I sure hope he takes my advice of doing a current Brat Pack style film with all those guys. I think it would be really, really cool. Great stuff. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Celebrity Jobber Podcast. Follow on Instagram, celebrity_jobber_podcast. Also, youtube.com/the@celebrityjobber. And follow on Substack @celebrityjobber. So if you really like the podcast and you want more content, I recommend subscribing to Substack. Who are these people? Who were they before they were famous? Some of them might hold a completely different job today than what we initially knew them from years ago. Just like Andrew McCarthy, now an author, but always, in my mind, a member of the Brat Pack. Thanks so much for listening, and until next week, I'll see you then. I'm Jeff Zito.